Okay, so today I wanted to talk in specific about covert narcissists and why and how they have to make you look and feel like the problem when in fact it's their own shame that's irritating to them. And unlike overt narcissists, where it's very clear and easy to notice the narcissist being narcissistic, with covert narcissists, things fly under the radar. For example, have you ever had a conversation with somebody that you felt was high on the scale of NPD, somebody that you felt was a covert narcissist, and you're having this normal conversation, you can't really pinpoint what exactly they're doing, at least not in the beginning. Once you get to know more and more about covert narcissists, it does get easier to spot. But anyway, in the beginning, you can't really notice what's happening, but you leave the conversation feeling like your soul just got zapped out of you. In fact, it's almost like you leave every conversation with this person with some kind of weird, uncomfortable residue that kind of stays with you, making you feel like, did I do something wrong? What happened? Why do I feel so bad? Well, that weird residue is not coincidental. It's not random. It's actually intentional on the part of the covert narcissist. In fact, it's part of their survival strategies that keeps them from their own unprocessed, unbearable shame. So in this video, I want to help you to learn how to start seeing it faster, how to understand what's happening, but most importantly, how you can stop yourself from getting sucked into these conversations or these relationships that cause you to carry shame that's not yours. So that being said, let's dive in. For those that don't know me, my name is Michele. I'm a survivor myself of childhood trauma, emotional trauma, and narcissistic abuse. I'm now a somatic experiencing practitioner and the founder of the School of Transformation, which to me is like nervous system rehab. It's where I meet live on Zoom weekly with survivors from all over the world, and we learn how to embody healing. Here on my channel, I talk about what healing is like, but in the School of Transformation, we experience it together. So if you're ready to dive deeper, make sure you check out the School of Transformation. So let's talk about how shame is experienced early in life, especially when it's chronic, it's relational shame. That type of shame doesn't just fade away as we get older, especially if we suppressed it because we didn't have the support. And when I say we, I mean either targets or narcissists themselves. In other words, when chronic shame is experienced over and over in childhood and it goes unhealed, it doesn't just disappear. It actually puts on a costume. The costume you put on depends on your own nervous system, your role in the family, and what felt most safe. So for some, shame turns into grandiosity, a mask of superiority that covers up that unbearable belief, I'm defective, there's something wrong with me. So that's what an overt narcissist does. But for others, shame hides behind guilt tripping, emotional fragility, being a wolf in sheep's clothing. And that's often covert narcissism. Those are two protective personalities that get formed because of unbearable shame. But there's another one that applies to us trauma survivors as well. It's when shame turns inward. We don't project it, we absorb it. We make ourselves small, accommodating, endlessly apologetic. We call it codependency, but it's really a protective personality that says, if I make myself easy, if I make others happy, maybe I'll be safe. All three of these are trauma responses that are trying to solve the same problem, which is how do I stay connected without being rejected? So yeah, this is something that as victims or targets of narcissistic abuse, something we have in common with the narcissist is that we also have a protective self that was born out of a sense of survival. But again, we're going to focus right now on the covert narcissist and how their protective strategies wind up harming others. So let's talk about what this looks like in real life. Right, here are some examples. A very subtle thing that can happen when you're having a conversation with a narcissist. Remember, everything they're doing is all about them avoiding feeling shame and feeling less than and unworthy, defective, broken. And so when you're talking and sharing something about yourself, maybe you're excited about something, maybe you're passionate, maybe you did something amazing and you're celebrating yourself, their expression, their tone of voice will be subtle. They're not attacking, they're not saying anything negative, but it's like they're putting a pin in a balloon. They're deflating your sense of excitement and worth. And suddenly you just feel bad. You don't know why. You're like, why am I feeling so bad? They're not really doing anything obviously bad, but I'm feeling horrible. And they might say something to guilt trip you, like, oh, good for you. Or they might say something like, oh, that must be nice. And again, that sounds so simple. So simple that if you're talking to somebody that doesn't understand narcissistic abuse, they'll look at you and be like, you got upset over that? But the reality is they are deflating your sense of self. Their shame is coming up. You're feeling it. You're taking it on. You start feeling bad about yourself. We're going to talk about why in a moment. But in a very subtle way, there's been an exchange of energy where they took their shame, projected it onto you, you felt it, and they feel better. And it might sound weird, like why would that cause them to feel shame? And that's because anytime somebody else is doing anything and the attention is on somebody else and they're celebrating themselves, in their head, they think that makes them better. They're not on the top. That means you're better, I'm worse, and they feel that shame. It doesn't make sense. Most of our survival strategies don't, right? So just in their defense, it doesn't make sense, but that's what happens inside of them. Another subtle way that you might notice them projecting their shame and dysregulating you in order to not feel their own shame is when you point out a bad behavior or something they did that hurt you. And you're not attacking them, right? You do it in a very reasonable way. You might say something like, when you say this, or when you ignore me in public, or when you make jokes at my expense, or when you give me backhanded compliments, it makes me feel this. Right? So it's a very reasonable way to express yourself. Well, they'll turn that around in a very covert way, and they will imply, in other words, they love guilt tripping and they love implying that there's something wrong with you for seeing them as less than perfect. Again, they're trying to not feel their own shame. And so instead of viewing imperfection as a normal thing that everyone has, everyone experiences, they view it as a defect. And they twist it around so that you feel bad. And suddenly when you're feeling bad, they've just transferred their shame into you. The last one I'm going to mention that I'm hoping these make sense. So let me know down below in the comments if you've experienced one or all three of these scenarios. The last one is when you're talking and sharing. I always say that narcissists don't listen, they pause. Well, the covert narcissist, when they pause, has an expression on their face. It's almost like this one eyebrow up as they're looking at you. I can't do it, but it's like this expression of irritation. But if you ask them, are you okay? Is everything okay? They'll be like, yeah, why are you asking me that? As they're listening to you, it's very uncomfortable. And we're actually going to get into why these three covert behaviors affect some people, because they don't affect everyone. So if they do affect you, you're definitely going to want to keep watching this video. But those are three things that narcissists do. And so with this last one, you might be like, well, why is that them transferring their shame onto someone else, or how? Basically, having to listen to someone else means I have to show importance to someone else. I have to live in the belief they matter. Otherwise, I wouldn't listen to them. And so it irritates them to have to do that because, again, in their head, everything is an either or. I matter or you matter. It's never we both matter. And so if they have to listen to you and they feel like, oh, that person's important, that means I'm the one that's bad, I'm the one that's unworthy, they have to do something, thus the expression of disdain, irritation, impatience, as if you're a burden, that helps them equalize what they're feeling inside. Now, here's a hard truth that I had to come face to face with, so I'm sharing this with you, is that these subtle behaviors to some people, they feel like torture. They feel so emotionally devastating, while to others, it doesn't even touch them. In other words, the narcissist tactics of trying to get others to regulate their shame doesn't work on everyone. And here's why. For anyone that doesn't have a shame wound, they will notice the narcissist behavior, but it doesn't touch them. It doesn't make them internalize or make it mean anything about themselves. They might say something like, well, that's a rude person, or that person is really socially unaware or disconnected. They'll call it for what it really is, a lack on the narcissist's part. And so if you're a target of narcissistic abuse with a shame wound and you talk to somebody that doesn't have a shame wound, it can be extremely invalidating. They can look at you and say things like, that's not a big deal. But what they're not realizing is that to somebody with a shame wound, it is a big deal. And so just keep in mind, like, who you share your experience with matters. If you share your experience with people that don't get it, it can actually create more pain and more invalidation in you. This is why healing our own unhealed trauma from the past is so important, because it's our wounds, our shame wound, that covert narcissists really use to reel you into a relationship that is very destructive. Which is why in the School of Transformation, we spend time not overly focusing on the narcissist, but rather on the beliefs and the imprints they left behind. In fact, in the month of June, we're going to learn how to upgrade a belief like, I'm bad, I'm unworthy, there's something wrong with me. And we're going to do it together. We meet live on Zoom every week. So if that's something you're interested in, make sure you come check us out. So remember, talking to people that have been there, that have gone through it, is going to help you to feel that validation. Just like I would never go to somebody that's colorblind to help me coordinate my outfit, it's the same thing with healing from this type of covert, hidden, subtle abuse. The first thing we have to do is call it for what it is. This is emotional abuse. Even if they're not yelling, even if they're not insulting you, even if it looks so subtle. In fact, it would be like somebody that knows that a person is going out into the wilderness and they take their compass and they put a magnet to it so that it gives the false direction. Or somebody that clips a person's brakes, or gives them a kiss as they leave for work. There's intent to cause harm. And those behaviors of a narcissist have the intent to cause you to live in emotional dysregulation so that they can feel better. It's abuse. Now, I state that because there was a time when I didn't recognize that. I could recognize obvious forms of abuse, but these subtle forms of abuse would cause me to start questioning myself, which is exactly what a narcissist wants you to do. So if this is resonating with you, what do? Here are 3 tips that can start helping you. The first is to notice and pause the pattern. In other words, the second they do something to put their shame in you, see if you can notice what you feel in your body. Notice your breath and ask yourself, is this my shame or theirs? In other words, we have to start strengthening our emotional boundaries. And we have to realize we don't have to take responsibility for someone else's emotional state. And that's not being cold. It's healthy separation. The second thing is we want to learn how to reclaim our internal safety. Covert narcissists hook into your nervous system. So the healing begins by restoring your own regulation. Instead of trying to regulate them and try to get them to stay happy and never be upset, no, it's about regulating yourself. And so when they act hurt or twist the narrative, even though your impulse might be to over-explain, you begin realizing what you're feeling and reminding yourself, I don't have to be the fixer or the rescuer. I'm allowed to take up space. And so you slowly break the trauma bond from the inside out. And the third tip is to learn to recognize the somatic red flags. Sometimes we miss the signs because the manipulation is so subtle. But guess what, guys? Your body always knows. You might notice a tight throat, your chest getting heavy, a sudden sense of confusion or guilt, and you're not really sure why. Those are somatic signals where your body's saying something is off here. And if your body has been trained to override those signals, that's okay. You can retrain it. And again, that's exactly what we do inside the School of Transformation. We don't just learn about trauma. We walk through the process of rewiring our nervous system so we don't keep attracting people who are allergic to truth, to authenticity. So if you've been learning but can't seem to embody what you've been learning, come check out our live weekly Zoom meetings.